Okay, we are getting into it. Yes, December the 15th. And we are close to Christmas. And that's why I got my cool Christmas banner up there. Yeehaw. Hey, man, we're in Acts chapter 24. Whether you're listening to the Morning Devo with Bo O here in Tucson or far away, like in Russia, maybe, or other places. And hey, just want to welcome you in. And we are going to be in Acts chapter 24. Another interesting passage, a lot of history with these characters that we meet. These are real people and real history. The Bible is not a make believe book like many people say. It's rooted in history, and that's why you could study other historians and read about these people and some of the events that's being spoken of in the book of Acts, which is a historical record of the early church, especially the lives of Peter and Paul, and written by a doctor named Luke. So Paul it now is being taken to Governor Felix and in Caesarea, and this is a familiar place for Paul, and he's been there before on different journeys and stuff like that. Now, Paul was in this riot, and this guy Claudius Lysias, who was the basically in charge of the police, if you will, the Roman police in Jerusalem, took Paul and had him saved from the multiple of riots that have seems like they've been taking place to kill Paul. And Paul was in a riot in Jerusalem. Then there was a riot that broke out in what was called the Sanhedrin, this religious court that oversaw the religious world of the Jews at the time, which Paul was a part of at one point. And Paul had a chance to address them, and kind of they broke out in a riot. The bottom line is there was a lot of hate towards Paul, and I just got to tell you right off the bat that it really bothers me when I hear people say things like, I voted for that person because I hate the other person. Um, this kind of idea of hatred being your motivator, I don't know where we get the idea that that's going to work out for good in our lives or in the lives of our society in general. Where does that kind of hatred really produce anything good, um, in our lives? And here we see so much hatred towards Paul simply for preaching a religious doctrine. And sure, they've conjured up charges against him, false charges, and they're declaring these false charges, just like they did with Jesus. But it's amazing that the motivation. I want you guys to see the motivation of these people is an incredible amount of hate. And hate, it ain't gonna work. It ain't gonna give them peace in their life. There's always like something crazy about hate, and that is you're trying to get your way. You're trying to manipulate things the best that you can, to get your way. It's kind of like a way of narcissistic behavior, meaning such extreme selfishness that will hate people in order to get our way. But it never really works. We never really get our way. We never really get the things that we're really looking for. And you look at the lives of these people. If you read about, the high priest Ananias at this time, and what he was like in history, or Felix and what he was like in history, and Drusilla and what she was like in history, and you go down the list of people, you find that there's tons of hatred in their life, and it results in so many bad decisions and so much yuck, um, and a lack of peace in their life. They have no peace, because there's such a strong hatred towards people, a vindication. I mean, not a vindication, but I wanted to say like this just intense kind of indignation, like they feel like they have a righteous wrath towards someone, that they want to get at them. and they feel righteous about it. And anyway, it's yuck. So Claudius Lysias sends Governor Felix a letter. And so this is kind of where we're picking up there. He's bringing him over. He's bringing him from Jerusalem to Caesarea to be tried in a court. And Felix is going to be the judge. Now, Felix wasn't the nicest guy, and he wasn't known as history as being one of the nicest guys. He actually, after his rulership, I think my Facebook just went down. Whoa, that was crazy. I think it just went down and then got back up. Hey, let me know if I'm back up real quick. Is anybody listening? Can someone tell me if I'm back up and things are good? Hey, Zeus, you're there in the morning. Could you let me know if we're good to go? I'm hoping we are. It says we're live. It says we're good to go. So I'm thinking we're good to go. That was weird. We have a little collapse of our stream there. Anyway, let me just keep going, and I hope it's good to go. So it says 5 days later, the high priest Ananias went down to Caesarea with some of the elders and a lawyer named Tertullus, and they brought their charges against Paul before the governor. When Paul was called in, Tertullus presented his case before Felix. We have enjoyed a long period of peace under you, and your foresight has brought about reforms in this nation. Everywhere and in every way, most excellent Felix, we acknowledge this with profound gratitude. But in order not to weary you further, I would request that you be kind enough to hear us briefly. So a wonderful, flattering kind of opening there. Oh, good. We're all good. Thanks, guys. But you get that idea that there's a lot of flattery going on. You always got to beware of a little bit of flattery, right? If someone says something about you, you might as well push that down when you're going to share, because it's not going to be too long, and people are going to realize you're just human like everybody else. So flattery is not the best, but that's how they did it back then. And of course, Felix was a guy who wanted to feel important, who came from a lowly background and was exalted by his brother into a place of leadership. And so it wasn't really what you knew, but it was who you knew. And so this flattery really was the way of the day. And a lot of times this is how things work as well in our world too, is a lot of flattery. And so it says, we have found this man to be troublemaker, stirring up riots among the Jews over all the world. He is a ringleader of the Nazarene sect and even tried to desecrate the temple. So we seized him by examining him yourself, and you will be, or by examining him yourself, you will be able to learn the truth about these charges we are bringing against him. So they bring against false charges. They tell Felix about these charges. And, Ananias is there, and he has his lawyer there, this Tertullus man. And, of course, they address Felix with this great kind of, your foresight is amazing. Let's not tell you what I really think about you. And this is kind of how our world works in politics. It's just crazy. A lot of hatred, as we've already talked about, that we got to be careful of hatred in our heart, because the fruits of that stuff are never going to be good in our life. And it wasn't good for these guys in their life. It killed a lot of people, and a lot of innocent people, and their blood was on their hands, and it affected too. If you learn about their personal lives, it affected every aspect of their life. It like corroded them. That hatred was like a cancer in them, man. It just spread throughout everything. And you could see how this manipulation works in the government, where there's a lot of, you're so good, so this, so that, so amazing. And it's amazing how we flip like that even in our country, right? Where 1 minute we can be, every 4 years, one vote for presidency. We're totally against this group of people because they're long-term politicians. So we don't want long-term politicians in. Then we get someone who's not a long-term politician in. And then after 4 years, we want long-term politicians back in. And we just flip all over the place, man. It just shows you how utterly frail, and we are. And it says, we have found this man to be a troublemaker. Now, did they really find Paul to be a troublemaker? No. Paul, why was he in the temple in Jerusalem? Was it because he was stirring up trouble? Was it because he was trying to desecrate the temple, by bringing non-Jewish people into the temple? No. He was actually there with Jewish lads, if I could use that word, the young lads, because they were fulfilling a vow under the Lord. And Paul was paying for their celebration and their ceremonies to be done. And so it was really for nothing further from the truth, what they were, saying. So it says the Jews joined in the accusation, asserting that these things were true. Remember, a riot broke out. And when the governor motioned for him to speak, Paul replied. So here's Paul's replying to the Governor Felix here. I know that for a number of years you have been a judge over this nation, so I will gladly make my defense. That was his. He didn't use any flattery. That's my point, right? He just says, hey, I understand who you are. You've been a judge over this area, so let me share with you. So notice Paul doesn't do what the other people do. They use flattery. Man, you are righteous. You are amazing. You have done so much great things, when really that's not true. Instead, Paul just says something that it is true. And that is, hey, you are the governor. And you are judge over the land, and I'm going to address you. You can easily verify that no more than 12 days ago, I went up to Jerusalem to worship. My accusers did not find me arguing with anyone at the temple, or stirring up a crowd in the synagogues, or anywhere else in the city. And they cannot prove to you the charges they are now making against me. However, I admit that I worship the God of our fathers as a follower of the way. So he worships Yahweh, the Lord, as a follower of the way. The way was an early name for the Christians. And it says they call this a sect. So it was called a sect of Judaism. So this is kind of cool for those who don't know, but Christianity was not something considered separate from Judaism. It was just another sect of it. It's the fulfillment of Judaism. So Christianity isn't separated from Judaism. It is fulfilled Judaism. That's what the Messiah has come to do, is fulfill the Old Testament laws and sacrifices and prophecies, and so Jesus being the fulfillment. And this is what Jesus said, I've not come to do away with the law, right, but to fulfill the law. And so Paul's reiterating that, hey, we are a sect of Judaism. That's how people see us. And he says, I believe everything that agrees with the law, and that is written in the prophets. So what Paul's saying is, I believe in the Bible. And the Bible that they had at that time was made up of what he says here, the law and the prophets. And that was a way that they could say the whole Old Testament. And so he says, I have the same hope in God as these men, that there will be a resurrection. So he says, just as so much of the Jewish hope is in the resurrection of the dead and the conquering of the grave, the conquering of death, think of it that way. So I strive always to keep my conscience clear before God and man. So I'm living in a life I'm really thinking about what I'm doing. I'm really looking at it and going, hey, what is testing my motivations? Where's my lust at? Where's my greed at? Where's my pride at? Where's this at? Where's my fear at? Where's my insecurities at? He's living with a clear conscience. He's trying to keep that conscience clear before the Lord. He's always doing an introspection. Isn't that cool? This morning you could do an introspection of your life, right? You can look at your life and start doing a little inventory, right? Hey, how am I doing here? How am I doing there? And that's what we're always doing. And if you're not doing that, then you're probably, going all over the place. And just think if Ananias did a little inventory. Just think if Felix did a little inventory. What would happen? And so I want you to see that Felix is kind of getting to doing an inventory in here, but something happens and he kind of shies away. But look, watch this. It says, after an absence of several years, I came to Jerusalem to bring my people gifts for the poor. So that's what Paul came to do. He came to bring a gift of money during the Feast of Pentecost, the outpouring, the wonderful festival of outpouring, and he comes to bring the poor this wonderful financial money, and he says, and to present offerings. And I was ceremonially clean, and they found me in the temple courts doing this. There was no crowd around me, nor was I involved in any disturbance. But there are some Jews from the province of Asia who ought to be here before you and bring charges if they have anything against me. Or these who are here should state what crime they found in me when I stood before the Sanhedrin. Unless it was this one thing, I shouted as I stood in their presence, it is concerning the resurrection of the dead that I am on trial before you today. Then Felix, who was well acquainted with the way, adjourned the proceedings. And when Lysias the commander comes, he says, I will decide your case. He ordered the centurion to keep Paul under guard, but give him some freedom, and permit his friends to come and take care of him. Now, we're not recorded about any friends coming to take care of him. I want you to see something. Where was the apostles? Where was James? Where were these dudes? You know, did they follow Paul there? Did they go there and like vouch for Paul and say, hey man, Paul's right, this is ridiculous, like we actually sent him to the temple with these Jewish lads to complete this ceremony? And like, no, we don't see that. Very interesting, right? Paul's really alone here. He's really on his own. And God spoke to him privately and said, hey, be of good cheer, be of courage, man. I'm going to bring you before these leaders. And sometimes we just have to take courage that God has a plan and a purpose, and he's going to bring us before the people that we need to be brought before it's time for us to go and see him face to face. So Felix puts him in house arrest, says, hey, your friends could come, they can hang out with you. We don't know if anybody was with them. We don't see that. Excuse me. And then it says several days later, Felix came with his wife Drusilla. It's his second wife. He had three, who was a Jewess. And so she sent for Paul and listened to him as he spoke about faith in Christ Jesus. So Felix knows about the way. He knows about the Christians. Why? Because in history it's recorded that he actually hung out with a guy named Simon, the sorcerer, the guy from Acts chapter 8, if you will. So Felix already had a good idea about Christianity, a little bit of an idea anyway, maybe a distorted view, maybe not, but he was really intrigued by it, obviously. And Drusilla was a Jew, and she is from the line of Agrippa, and like the Herod Agrippas, and so she's from that lineage. And so she has this history of, Christianity and the Herodian dynasty. Man, you could study that, but it kind of has always, right, crashed. And it says that here he sent for Paul and listened to him as Paul shares about Christ. Now, this is cool because God told Paul that, hey, you're gonna preach to kings. And you know what? When God speaks to you and says, hey, you're going to, I'm gonna use you in your life, you can be sure, man, that's gonna happen. How exciting is that gonna be? And God can use you. And sorry, excuse me for the live videos going up and down. I don't know if it's my internet or what's going on, but it might be Facebook too. So it's really neat. It says, as Paul discoursed on righteousness, self-control, and the judgment to come, Felix was afraid and said, that's enough for now. You may leave. When I find it convenient, I will send for you. At the same time, he was hoping that Paul would offer him a bribe, so he sent for him frequently and talked with him. When 2 years had passed, Felix was succeeded by Portus, Porcius Festus, but because Felix wanted to grant a favor to the Jews, he left Paul in prison. Now, the last thing I just could share, because we're kind of talking a little bit about motivation, is you look at this guy's motivation for hearing about Jesus. What really was it? See, this is where like so much manipulation in your life, when you are manipulating things over and over and over and over, it can just build and build and build and build. And that's why we need a place to just be honest and share truly what's going on in our lives and in our hearts. Because, poor Felix was from a line of politicians, and all he knew how to do was lie and manipulate and hate and use people, and be about everything, and any kind of relief he had was in self-pleasuring, through the animalistic lustfulness that we fall into as human beings. And you see just how sad it was. He brought in Paul to listen to him, but he wasn't really listening to him. He just was hoping that Paul was going to give him a bribe so that there would be some kind of money he could receive, or something he could receive from Paul, because obviously Paul was a big deal. Many, many, many people wanted him killed. Thousands of people wanted him killed. People not only in Jerusalem, but all over the region, all over into Turkey, wanted him killed. Probably even into Greece. So, really radical, right? The amount of people that wanted Paul gone. And he thought, wow, this is such an important person. I can get some money out of this. And so he was hoping a lobbyist group would come to him and say, hey, we'll give you this amount of money if this happens. So you could see how this kind of political manipulation has been in our world forever. And if you don't think things are moved by money, everything in our culture is moved by money, man. You are not. You gotta plug in or plug out of the matrix, and you're gonna have to kind of wake up a little bit, in the true sense of the term. Wake up a little bit, as the Bible says, "Let us wake from our slumber," and realize that everything's being pushed by money, and money is the huge thing in our world, and that's how it was back then too. There was all this manipulation going on. But I want you to see, lastly, is just that opportunity for Felix to really look at his heart. And it says, as Paul discoursed on righteousness, meaning we need to be as righteous as God, self-control, to live a life of self-control, not just going with our animalistic instincts, and the judgment to come, that God will judge the world because of its sin, and and that kind of idea. Those things he did not want to hear. He became afraid, and he said, no. He said, no, I'm not going to listen anymore. And this is what happens in all of our lives. And certainly in my life, I can totally relate to Felix, because I'm no different from this man. And that, all that's in Felix is in me. And I don't think of myself any greater than this guy. When someone shared with me about these ideas of God desires for us, or he requires us to live righteous lives, and he will judge the world in righteousness, and then those things convicted me huge. I didn't want to hear that. Why didn't I not want to hear that? Because I simply wanted to do what I wanted to do. I want to live the way I want to live. I do not want anybody telling me what I can and can't do. And so that left me with this idea of like, man, I hope this ain't true. And I'm going to walk away. I'm going to go away from it. And that's why heaven ain't going to be heaven. And people don't want to go to heaven, because who wants to be in righteousness? Who wants to be around perfection? Who wants to be around God, right? A holy God, a perfect being, right? We would rather live on earth in our animalistic instincts and doing what we want to do. But notice how Felix had an opportunity to really look at his life and go, man, how much of my life is built on hate? How much of it is built on narcissism, me just wanting what I want? How much of it is built on discontentment, how much of my actions are built off of fear, how much of my actions are built off of all these areas, insecurities, um, or just wanting things my way, and that I don't really care how I do things, how I make money, how this happens, what I do with my money. It's about me. It's about living. It's about me getting my thing. It doesn't matter about anything else. So that I can go on my vacation, so I could retire at the age of 40, so I could do. Those are the things, and and those things scared Felix to think like, man, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong about life. And that's the scary thing about the Bible, is that, and about doing an inventory when we read something like the Bible, right? Is that just, what if we're wrong? What if we really don't have it right? Maybe the reason we don't see God here on the planet is because maybe something's wrong with us. Maybe we are that debased. And that's something where a lot of us in our like Felix, we don't want to go there. Man, that's the last thing we want to do. We want to hold on to everything that we have instead of letting go. So Jesus said, hey, he who loses his life will gain it, and he who gains his life in this world will lose it. And Felix has chosen to gain his life in this world, and therefore he is losing it. And so, wow, what a lesson. So we should let us do some inventory, and let us really check our hearts. And it's okay, and get with people that love you and care for you, people that you can be honest with, and talk about the issues of your heart, and your selfish inclinations and the greeds and the things of that nature. And those are things we should be doing. So are good to do too, and it really frees you up to start walking in a lot of peace in your life. So, man, what a chapter. And there's so much to study in this chapter, so many good things to look at. And Paul's doing it by himself, man. He is his attorney. He's defending himself, and but yet he really feels confident God's on his side. And so we'll see what happens next or tomorrow as we get into the trial before Festus, and how this is going to look. We're waiting for Lysias to get there, the commander, the guy who was part of the arrest out in Jerusalem, and we'll see what happens. Okay? You guys take care. Bye-bye.